The river is rising! It's going to flood the village, James shouted, racing back to warn the people. But who would listen to a man who spoke to himself and danced when there was no music? James arrived in the village of Mumu on a hot afternoon, tired and worn from his long journey. He had been walking for days, following the river that snaked through the land, hoping to find a place to rest. His clothes were mismatched, a bright red shirt paired with green trousers that barely reached his ankles. He wore 2 different shoes, one brown and one black. The villagers of Mumu, known for their kindness, welcomed him with open arms despite his unusual appearance. "Welcome to our village, stranger," one of the elders said. "You must be tired. Come, sit and have some food." James smiled, grateful for the hospitality. He sat down under a large baobab tree and accepted the bowl of yam porridge handed to him by a woman nearby. As he ate, the villagers gathered around, curious about the stranger. "Where do you come from?" a young man asked. James wiped his mouth and responded in a soft voice. "I have travelled from far away, following the river. I seek a place to call home." The villagers, noticing his odd clothing and the way he gazed off into the distance, whispered among themselves, but they didn't question him further. After all, Mumu was known for welcoming travellers, and everyone thought that perhaps James's strange appearance was just a result of his long journey. Little did they know, James wasn't just any traveller. He was different, and soon they would all learn just how different. The next morning, as the villagers went about their daily routines, they began to notice James's odd behaviour. He would walk around the village, talking to himself as if having a conversation with someone no one else could see. He muttered words under his breath, sometimes laughing for no apparent reason. "James, who are you talking to?" one of the market women asked, chuckling as she watched him. James paused, looked at her with wide eyes and said, "The river speaks and I listen." The woman laughed, thinking he was making a joke, but James wasn't joking. As the day went on, his behaviour became even stranger. He danced in the middle of the marketplace when there was no music playing, his feet tapping in rhythm to a tune only he could hear. At times he would stop and stare at the sky, mumbling words that made no sense. The villagers began to talk. "He's a strange one," they said. "Maybe there's something wrong with him." They found him amusing and some pitied him. They would throw him scraps of food and laugh when he talked about things no one understood. Some even called him the village fool. "Look at the way he dances," they laughed. "What a fool he is." Others went further, calling him a madman. "He must be touched by madness. No one acts like that unless they are not right in the head." But James didn't seem to mind the names they called him. He continued with his strange ways, smiling as he danced and talked to himself. It was as if he lived in a world of his own, completely unaffected by the mockery around him. Several weeks passed, and the rainy season began. The sky darkened with heavy clouds, and the air was thick with humidity. One day, James stood by the river, watching as the water began to rise higher than usual. His face grew serious, his usual carefree expression replaced by one of concern. He ran back to the village, waving his arms and shouting, "The river! The river is rising! We must build walls to protect the land, or the water will take everything." The villagers looked at him and laughed. "Oh, James, there you go again with your foolishness. The river has never flooded. Why should we worry now?" But James wasn't joking this time. He ran to Chief Olowu's house and begged for a meeting with the village elders. When he was finally brought before them, he spoke urgently. "The river is angry," James said. "I have been watching it, and the water is rising too fast. If we do not act now, the flood will wash away our crops, our homes, everything." Chief Olowu frowned. "James, you have been acting strangely since the day you arrived. Why should we believe you now? The river has never harmed us before." "I understand," James replied calmly. "But this time is different. The river has changed. Please, we must act." The elders murmured among themselves, but Chief Olowu shook his head. We have always trusted the river, and it has always provided for us. We will not waste our time building walls." Dejected but determined, James left the meeting and went to the riverbank. He started building a small wall out of stones and sticks, hoping to do what he could to prevent the disaster he knew was coming. The villagers watched him from a distance, shaking their heads and laughing. "He's a fool," they said. "What can one man do against the river?" Then, one fateful night, the rain began to fall. It was unlike anything the villagers had seen before. The sky opened up, and the rain poured down in sheets, drenching the land. Thunder roared and lightning cracked across the sky, lighting up the darkness. The river swelled, the water rising higher and higher, faster than anyone could have imagined. By morning, the river had overflowed its banks, surging into the village with a terrifying force. The fields were flooded, the crops were washed away, and water filled the villagers' homes. People scrambled to save what they could, but the flood was relentless. Panic spread throughout Mumu. The river is taking everything," they cried. The villagers ran to the square where Chief Olowu stood, his face pale with fear. "We should have listened to James," he admitted. "He warned us, but we ignored him." The villagers, desperate and frightened, realized that James might be their only hope. They rushed to find him, hoping he would know how to stop the flood. They found James sitting by the small wall he had built, watching the rising water with sad eyes. Chief Olowu approached him, his voice filled with regret. "James," he said, "we did not listen to you, and now our village is in danger. Please, do you know how we can stop the flood?" James looked up at the chief and the crowd of worried villagers. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "I know how to save the village, but if I help you, I will ask for a price." The chief, thinking James might ask for food or clothing, said, "Whatever you ask, we will give it to you. Just help us stop the flood." But James shook his head. "No," he said, "I don't want food or clothes. If I save the village, I want to be the chief of Mumu." The villagers gasped. "James, the chief," they whispered. "He's just a fool. How can we let him lead us?" Chief Olowu was just as surprised. "You want to be the chief?" he asked. "James, you have never led anyone before. How can we trust you to lead our village?" James stood firm. "You may call me a fool," he said, "but I know the river. If you want me to save the village, you must agree to my terms." The villagers were reluctant, but they had no choice. The floodwaters were rising quickly, and no one knew how to stop them. After much discussion, they agreed to give James what he asked for. James wasted no time. He began giving orders to the villagers, instructing them to gather stones, wood, and anything else that could be used to build a dam. Under his guidance, they worked together to build a barrier that would hold back the water. As the villagers toiled, James directed them with surprising confidence. He showed them how to place the stones and logs in a way that would block the river's flow. It was clear that he understood the river's movements better than anyone. For hours they worked without rest, building the dam as the rain continued to fall. Slowly but surely the dam took shape and the floodwaters began to recede. By the time the rain stopped, the village had been saved. The crops were damaged, but the homes were spared, and the villagers breathed a sigh of relief. When the work was done, Chief Olowu approached James, tired and humbled. "You have saved us, James," he said. "As we promised, you will be the new chief of Mumu." The villagers, still in shock, gathered in the square to witness the ceremony. James, the man they had called a fool, was now their leader. As he stood before the people of Mumu, James explained his strange ways. "I speak to myself," he said, "because I'm always thinking about the world around me. I dance because I feel joy in my heart, even when others cannot hear the music. And I speak in riddles because I see things that others do not. I may have been called a fool, but I have always loved this village. I only wish to serve it well. Let this be a lesson to all of us. Wisdom can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes it takes a fool to see the truth that others miss." The villagers listened carefully, no longer laughing at him. They realized that James wasn't a fool after all. He had been wise all along, and his strange behavior had hidden a deeper understanding of the world. From that day on, the villagers of Mumu learned to respect James and his wisdom. They had learned a valuable lesson. Never judge someone by their appearance or actions alone, for wisdom can come from the most unexpected places. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this. Thank you for watching and see you next time.